All right, here we are, Cole Poots doing. Oh man, I've been excited for this video. Literally, I came up with this idea probably like a day ago, honestly, but I am doing a top 10 albums of 2020 in my personal opinion. I want to just say, like, as a disclaimer here, a lot of my background comes from my parents. They listen to 80s hairball music, Red Hot Chili Peppers, those sorts of bands, and that's kind of how I grew up. But then as I got older, I really transitioned into a lot of rap. I do like alternative music. I'm not really into country, so you're not going to find any country albums on this list. And I would say sometimes that maybe my music choices lack a little bit because I am biased towards rap. So just know that, and I haven't heard every album that's been played or dropped in 2020. There's actually still a few albums that I haven't gotten to that are on my list. So just keep that into mind. Time to get into the top 10. This is really hard, man. I'm trying to compile a top 10, but I think I've got it down to a science, and I'm going to try and explain why these albums are in their certain positions. So at number 10, it is Detroit 2 by Big Sean. He said in his interviews about Detroit 2 is that he always felt like Detroit 1 was like more like an album, but it never got credit for an album. It was actually a mixtape, and so then he finally made like an album, and then he titled it Detroit 2. I think a lot of these tracks are hit or miss, but for the most part, it's really good to hear Big Sean come back with, I wouldn't even call it vengeance. I just feel like Big Sean on this project has gotten so much more descriptive about himself, his life, where he's at. My favorite song on the project is Full Circle, that features Key Wayne and Diddy. And, he's essentially talking about how, everything that you put into this life, it's kind of hard to imagine of how those things are going to come back to you in a later time period. But you have to trust that process. You have to trust that everything comes full circle, and everything that you've put out there is going to come back to you at some point. There are some songs on there, like I will say, there's some heavy Travis Scott influences, like Lithuania, the one that does have Travis Scott on there. It doesn't feel like a Big Sean song. It feels like a Travis Scott song. Travis Scott came on to the feature, and then Big Sean kind of adjusted to how Travis Scott sounds. But I don't know. That's kind of the cool thing to see in rap nowadays too, is that like every other artist kind of pulls influences from other artists. Like the new wave of sound, people are influenced by like Playboy Cardi, or like mumble rapping. Like even Drake has copied like Playboy Cardi's flow on a song. So it's just interesting to see. But yes, Big Sean had a really good year, and I love this project. I think not heavy enough to get further down the list. That's why it's at number 10. Number 9, where are we? Alfredo by Freddie Gibbs and the Alchemist. Wow. Alchemist is putting out so much music in 2020 while in quarantine, while going through a pandemic. All this man does is put out fucking fire. This is such a good project. Just so spacey, and that's the thing that I love about The Alchemist is, like, for all of his music that you listen to, it transports you from, like, this, I guess I'm saying, like, in your mind. You're sitting here, maybe in your desk, or you're driving in your car, but you plug in this project from Freddie Gibbs' Alchemist, or anything that Alchemist has ever put out, and he takes your current position in life, and he transports you to another realm of reality. Or maybe it's not even reality. Maybe it's just fucking imagination. But hold on. Freddie Gibbs, terrific artist, tremendous flows on this album. Really like the features too with Benny the Butcher and Tyler the Creator. Very solid project. Can't wait to see what The Alchemist cooks up in this next year. Number 8, Unlocked by Denzel Curry and Kenny.Beats. This one's very short. It's only like 8 tracks. So, I mean, we're going to consider it an album, though. When I was looking at like all the albums that have been released this year, they counted this one as an album. Denzel Curry is just one of those interesting artists because like he brings so much tenacity and grit and filth to a track. Like the way that he raps is just so amazing to listen to, and it's very captivating as a listener. And I don't know much about Kenny.Beats, but a lot of people have given him high praise, so it's kind of cool to see this dual lingo of a project. Looking at the album artwork, that's something that I always think of when when looking at music. You know, if it's a really interesting album cover, I think that adds to the complexity of, you know, what the album offers. I feel like it's one of those projects that like comes in really quickly, shocks you, gives you a punch, and then just leaves, and you're like, what the fuck just happened? That's what I feel like one of these this project is in particular. Number 7, Limbo by Eminem. This is an album that kind of took me by surprise, honestly. There's that Kobe interlude where Eminem is talking about how when Kobe died, there was a part of him that died off too when Kobe died, because he had such a strong connection to liking to Kobe growing up that he felt like guys, I'm sorry about my voice, it's just really hoarse. Growing up with one of your idols, someone that you really look up to have them pass away, there's a part of you that dies with them. And it was really interesting when he said that, because he's like, you know, a part of my innocence, a part of my youth, a part of my childhood died when Kobe died. And it made me sort of like mature faster and want to figure out things like monetary funds, like how to buy a house, things like that. But when he said that, it made me think about Mac Miller. Everybody that knows me truly knows that Mac Miller is the most important person, like in terms of like artist, rapper, like whatever you want to call him, famous person, someone that I look up to as an idol. Musically, that's the guy that I've always been inclined to listening to. He's my favorite. And when he died, I didn't realize this at the time, but then listening to this little Kobe interlude by Eminem, it made me think of the whole process of what happened to me when Mac Miller died. When Mac Miller released Swimming and then shortly died a month after, I was going through a lot in my life, and there were a lot of things at that point that were about ready to take a shift in a different direction, and I didn't know what was going to happen. But at that time, I didn't realize it at that time, but there was a part of my soul, there was a part of my psyche, there was a part of my the younger Cole Poots that died off when Mac Miller died. And I didn't think about it back then, but as I'm looking back at it now and listening to this little Kobe interlude that, you know, kind of gives you tingles, it's like, damn, that's the truth. And I think that's probably happened for a lot of people, you know, a lot of the greats that died way too young. Favorite track, though, off this album is Roots featuring J.A.D. and Charlie Wilson. A beautiful song. Yeah, Eminem shocked me with this album. That's why it's, you know, a little bit higher than those last 3. I put it at 7. Great project. I'm really excited to see what he comes up with next. And, you know, he could potentially be one of those artists that just moves up in my tier list of, like, you know, some of my favorites. So, number 6, this is an interesting one. Now More Than Ever by Flatbush Zombies. The reason I chose Now More Than Ever, Flatbush Zombies, even though it's only 6 tracks and I think technically counts as an EP. I know I said albums, but this could consider projects too. This EP would have gone higher if it had more songs. This is high up on my list and probably should be even higher, but the reason that I didn't put it even further up is because of the fact that it's only 6 songs and it counts as an EP. Flatbush, they're one of those artists, those groups that I think, again, doesn't really get a whole lot of recognition for because they're not necessarily mainstream, which I totally enjoy. But if you're in the rap community, you know exactly who they are. They just put out heat all the time, and there's just so many good tracks on here. First off, I want to say R.I.P. to Mac Miller. We gonna smoke these flowers in your honor, driving right around through the city. It just makes such good music, just quality good music, and it's so crazy because all three of them are vital to the success of the group. Like, Juice is, I mean, can sing, has really good harmony, but at the same time, like, he's had some of the best flows I have ever heard. I don't know, he kind of looks like a terrorist sometimes. But then you have Eric Ark Elliott, very meticulous, very methodical rapper, very great lyrics, great lyricist, but then also, you know, puts together most of their beats. I really think that they are one of the most slept on artists in the game right now. And I feel like whatever their next album is, it's going to take people by storm. Artists that stand the test of the time are the ones that change and evolve. Like, you think of Culture 1, which was a great project, but then there's Culture 2 that sounds the exact same. I appreciate artists that have more depth to them. So, number 6 is Now More Than Ever by Flatbush. It probably should be higher, but I'm not going to put it up higher because it doesn't have enough tracks. Number 5, No Pressure by Logic. I'm just very surprised that Logic is on this list. I've always had respect for Logic. I really did like his first project called Under Pressure, but then I think as Logic got more fame, got more recognition, he got a little bit more cringy, harder to listen to. I think made a lot of tracks just for monetary purposes. But I feel like this project in particular was a huge step up from some of his last few projects. And I feel like it kind of sets the record straight as he's going into retirement, which I don't think he'll ever fully be retired. I don't know if we'll ever see another Logic project. Holy fuck, man. This is hard to do when I keep coughing. But I won't believe that Logic will never make another project. But if this is the last Logic project that we ever get, I'm satisfied because it's just a really good body of work. And I think on Under Pressure he worked with No ID, and that they kind of did a reunion on this album. But it's just really cool, man, because Logic, it's interesting to see his progression and the lifestyle that he's lived. But now he's a dad, and he's kind of transitioning to that lifestyle. He's talking about certain things online, but it seems like he's done with music because of all the stress and the added anxiety and depression that it's added to his life of like being on social media. There's just some really good liners in here, like him talking about when he's off the internet, that's when he's at his happiest, and how he's scrolling so much that he's getting tunnel vision. And, you know, I mean, I don't know, I just really respect it because I go through the same things. And I mean, it's really hard to exist in a world that is so fast paced and connected and plugged into each other all the time, whether you be on social media, YouTube, anything, anything like that, anything that's online. But we fail to realize like how bad that is for our mental health, how much that makes us overthinkers. I really respect the fact that Logic is kind of taking a stand to, you know, everything that's given him the fortune that he has in this life. Like, a lot of all the money that he has comes from rapping, and now he's taking a break from it. So, or maybe he's permanently done. Okay, you know what? I just saw that I wrote 2 number 5, so I think I fucked up this entire list. Number 5, I guess. So I guess there's a tie for number 5. The Slow Rush by Tame Impala. Like, this is actually probably like the first non-rap album that made the top 10 Yeah, I had never listened to Tame Impala before this year, Kevin Parker, but I had heard so much hype from them. And also, again, it's one of those albums that had just like a really interesting cover art to it. And that's kind of what drew me in. Really enjoyed the track Posthumous Forgiveness, where Kevin Parker, I'm assuming, is talking about his dad and kind of forgiving him now, even though he can't talk to him. I think one of the prevailing themes of this album is time. And so I don't know, I really resonate with that because the concept of time is so lucid, but we underestimate the amount of progress that we can make in a given year, or then even, how much progress we can make in 3 months. So I really like this project because it brings in that aspect of time. And I think every one of us can agree that this year has just been a cluster fuck of madness, and we're all just ready for it to end. But there's also a lot of hope in knowing that in a year's time, even if you're struggling right now or you're not really happy with your current standing, you could be in a completely different place than next year. I guess this album, to me, what it feels like is a sense of hope for people, and to try and, when you find yourself struggling or you get in a rut or negative thinking, you have to kind of get some perspective on that situation and know that time is going to allow you to heal and get better and become a more efficient person as long as you're putting in the work. Number 4, it is Cool Tape Volume 3 by Jaden Smith. Y'all gotta stop sleeping on Jaden Smith. And you gotta feel bad for Jaden in some sense. I think a lot of people don't take him seriously because the way that he came into music, they probably think he's, riding off the coattails of his father and all that his father did. And certainly I could see that from the perspective that, people instantly know Jaden because of his father, but Jaden's kind of taken a different route. Like, I know that Will Smith did some music, but that really wasn't how he made a career. He more or less made his career on like movies, TV shows, stuff of that nature. Jaden Smith's a good artist, and he's growing and he's learning and he's starting to kind of develop his own voice. And I love this project, and everything that I've heard from Jaden up until this point continues to get better. Sure, there may be some songs in there that are kind of cringy, being young and in love, but it's like, it's also kind of nostalgic, and it's something that I think everybody could relate to because we've all had that first love. We've all had that high school sweetheart. But that's what I love about Jaden is like, you listen to his music and it's like you can feel that in some sense. Like, even if you aren't that young 19 starry-eyed young individual, innocent little guy, Jaden's got good stuff. He's got good stuff in the catalog. He sounds different than most artists out there. He's just, I feel like in some ways he's in a lane of his own because he's just different than what other artists provide. Number 3, Chilombo by Jhené Aiko. We cannot be disrespecting these female artists. This is one of the best projects of 2020. It could have been higher, but the top 2 on the list, they take precedence over her. But Jhené Aiko fucking shocked the hell out of me this year with her project Chilombo. She has taken such an interesting step in her evolution as an artist, how she used certain gongs, certain meditation tools, sounds that help healing, that literally realign your chakras. She used that throughout this whole project. So that's why it feels so like earthy and soulful and just meditative. There's really nothing bad I can say about this album. She just flows so well, and she did it in mind to help people deal with their trauma and heal. And I just think that's such a beautiful concept. Like, you don't see anybody trying the thing that she did this year with Chilombo. Coming in at number 2, we have Man on the Moon 3, The Chosen by Kid Cudi. Now, I know this dropped just a few short weeks ago, but it's Kid Cudi. It's Man on the Moon 3. It's a trilogy. I don't care who you are. Man on the Moon 1 and 2 are a huge, integral part of my adolescent years. Kid Cudi did something special here. And it's interesting because you get the announcement, I saw it on Instagram. You see that album cover, you see that it's Man on the Moon 3. There's instantly this expectation of, oh my God, is this going to add up to those earlier projects? And that's kind of what scared me going into it, because I was like, what if it's nothing like that? It more than delivered. It obviously reminds you of Man on the Moon 1, Man on the Moon 2, sort of atmospherical, kind of in its own realm of possibilities. But at the same time, it fits as its own unit because it's where Kid Cudi's currently at. There's only 2 songs that I really didn't like off of this album, and it was more of the feature tracks. It was the one with Pop Smoke and Skepta. I just didn't feel like it fit. And then there was Rockstar Nights featuring Trippie Redd. I didn't feel like that one fit either. Given what Cudi's gone throughout his life, he's had these moments where, he kind of got through a lot of his depression and anxiety early on, and what he made Man on the Moon 1 and 2 about. Kind of thought he was past it. And that's kind of what Cudi's admitting to, is that, like, he's kind of found comfort and acceptance in knowing that this is just who he is. This is the madness that goes on in his mind. And that's how I feel too. I tell this to people a lot, is that, it's hard not to get discouraged with, like, when you fall down, or when you get anxious again, or if you feel like you're getting prone to depression. But you, like, at the same time too, it's like I've come to expect it to some degree because it's happened so much throughout my lifetime. And I just love Cudi. I think Cudi's like one of those artists that just, like, kind of unites all the weirdos and all the people suffering and tells them it's going to be okay. And that's exactly what he did on this project. He's talking about how he's comfortable in this spot. Like, I will fall in the void, fall in the void, fall in the void, just to avoid. Like, that's sort of like where he finds comfort and warmth, is like sometimes you kind of have to allow yourself to do that. And I think as a society too, we're taught to run away from feeling bad, like from experiencing anxiety or anything that mimics depression, or maybe just even feeling sad. And maybe we get it confused with thinking that we're depressed, but none of us take the time to deal with it and sort it out, because, like I said earlier, we're so distracted. We're always plugged in that we don't do the work, the internal work on ourselves. Like, people don't realize how long they go through their life and they don't process things that have happened to them from years ago. And maybe it's not even their fault. I think humans unknowingly suppress a lot of things, but this album just kind of makes me think about that, and makes me realize that it's okay to accept the fact that you are this way and you're going to go through that throughout your life. Like, I go through these periods where anxiety seems to want to try and sink me. But as long as I'm able to tell myself that it's okay, and I've beaten this thing before, or, I've outlasted it, it's going to be okay. I'm going to get through it somehow. I'll make it to that point. Who knows when, but I will. And I hope that just as I get older, I'm just better at dealing with it. And I think that that's sort of what Cudi is acknowledging on this project. So it's just a beautiful project. I'm glad that we got it before this year was over. And it's one of those projects during the year where you felt like everybody was kind of connected in some way, like everybody was listening to it. I'm so glad we got it. Number 1. And I have a bias, so probably y'all were expecting this if you know me. Well, if you remember that this project came out back in January. Number 1 is Circles by Mac Miller. Now, so I had a conversation over Snapchat yesterday with my friend Olivia. Shout out to Olivia that goes to Simpson. Has one of the greatest, she's one of the people that I know that has the greatest music taste out there. We had this conversation about posthumous releases and how relatively, for a while now, when an artist dies and their label still puts out music after they die, it's usually for a cash grab, and they'll take demos or like B-sides or like songs that really weren't meant to be as a project, and then they put it out there because they want to build off of the notoriety of that person's name. I hate that. I fucking hate that. And usually posthumous releases feel like that. So I understand her point in saying that. But if I had to say that there was the best posthumous release and it was handled the best way, it would be Circles by Mac Miller, because Mac Miller's family took care of it and they did it in mind to try and keep Mac Miller's artist creative ideas, his integrity intact when releasing it. Now, the benefit to releasing this album and why it makes sense too is because it was, I'm not going to say it was almost complete before he died, but him and John Bryan and him worked on Swimming, and then this is the companion piece, the second piece to Swimming, and then there was supposed to be a third project, so it was going to be like this almost like a trilogy of albums based on this whole big concept that Mac Miller was dealing with. But Mac and John Bryan had many conversations about the direction of how he wanted to take Circles. Now, sure, if Mac was still alive, I'm sure he would have done a few things different. I'm sure that he may have put it out into the world a little bit differently, how he marketed it, how maybe, the track list may have been different. I mean, there's a lot of questions for any posthumous release, but this one I feel like had so many realistic traces of Mac that were already on it, and then from the conversations that him and John Bryan had, John Bryan sort of tied in, kind of connected the dots, tied in the loose ends based on the conversations he had with Mac. And also, Mac's family came to John Bryan and asked him if he'd be comfortable doing this. This is my number one album because it is Mac, but it is also because if you are a Mac fan, we were all left with this heavy burden and uncertainty of Mac's passing, and whether it was somewhat staged by him, like if he was actually contemplating doing it. I know he went out by drugs, but you could tell that he was unhappy in those final years with Swimming and Circles, even though I think Mac was trying to get better. This album is somewhat of, I think, one of the best send-offs that you could ever have from an artist that has departed this lifetime. It seems like Mac is on the other side. If there's a heaven, if there's another plane of reality, it seems like this was his goodbye, his farewell to his fans, and in some ways he was telling us that it was all going to be all right. And personally, again, with Swimming being like my favorite album of all time, Mac and any other artist, and everything that I was going through in life, I mean, Mac's done the biggest number on me in terms of like just changing the way I think when I listen to music. And it was super crazy because Mac Miller's family, they announced, I think on January 8th, that's when they announced that they were going to be releasing this album on the 17th. Literally the night before, I had a dream with Mac Miller, and this was like right when I was starting out my podcast, and he was sitting across the table from me, and him and I were talking, and we both had notebooks out, and we were writing these topics that we wanted to talk about. I'm assuming it was going to be on a podcast, and it was just so crazy. I mean, I don't normally have dreams of Mac, so when I do, I remember them pretty profoundly, and it was just crazy. For one, it had such specific detail to it because I even remember some of the things that I wrote down in my notebook to talk about him with on the podcast. But I'm not really a religious person. I'm more or less a spiritual person, and I think that in some ways, in that dream, so in some weird way, he was visiting me and telling me, kind of giving me, yeah, we didn't talk about like a posthumous release in the dream, but it's weird how that happened, how I had that dream, and then the next day, his parents announced that, and this is sort of like kind of his final goodbye, farewell to all of us, and he's helped me a lot over the years with mental health, kind of bringing me to understanding about what it is to experience, like, mental health up and down, back and forth in the trenches. Um, so it hits pretty deep for me on this album, and I think it's the best album of the year. I don't care if it's biased. Mac Miller was a great and should be appreciated as a great, and may not get the recognition that he deserves. I think he got a lot of it after he died, unfortunately, but at the same time, it's like I'm glad that people hear about him now. So, anyways, I don't know what else to say. I thought I was going to cry there for a second. If you have any agreements with my top 10, message me. But yeah, I fucking love music, and I thought it'd be a good idea to do a top 10 review. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you soon. Make sure you like this video and you subscribe to my channel. Blessings.